We're making banana bread, but not just any banana bread, a chocolatey version of banana bread. It's quick, it's easy, and it's banana bread, so what's not to like? We'll start by preheating an oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then pretty much everything after this takes place in a mixing bowl, so to that I'll be adding a couple of bananas, and you want them to be on the riper side of things, so these are pretty ripe, but they could be even more ripe to be sweeter and more banana-y for the purposes of this banana bread. These will do for now. And you can actually add a third banana if you want to, but I won't tell anyone. After that, I'll add a stick of butter, and normally I would use unsalted, but I was all out today, so we are using a salted stick. We'll use less salt later to factor that in. And do make sure the butter is room temperature so it can mix more evenly. After that, I'll add a quarter cup of brown sugar. You can really vary the sweetness here. We already have the bananas in here, depending on how sweet those are. That can determine how much sugar you use or don't use. And I typically substitute a good amount of the would-be sugar for maple syrup, just because it adds a little bit more of that maple flavor, which works nice with the chocolate, although you won't notice it too much. So I'll pour in about 4 or 5 tablespoons of maple syrup. I'll follow that up with a splash of vanilla extract. It probably ends up being about a teaspoon. Then I'll add a few twists of salt. Again, we have that salted butter in it already, so I'm not going overboard here. This might add up to half a teaspoon. And because we're making a chocolatey banana bread, I add 3 very heaping tablespoons of cocoa powder here. It probably ends up adding up to more like 4 or 5 tablespoons. And if you want to make this super chocolatey, you could probably add quite a bit more than this, and it'd be more like brownies or chocolate cake. This will be pretty chocolatey, but not over the top. And this won't be the only chocolate item we'll be adding. After the cocoa, I add a good tablespoon of ground cinnamon, although it probably ended up being more like 2 or 3 tablespoons. I'm not being precise here. It's banana bread. It's super forgiving, and you can get away with a lot. I'll mash all this down with my spoon a bit, just so things don't go flying everywhere when I turn on the mixer. I like to mix all of this up first so I can actually taste it before I put the raw eggs in there, and I can get a good gauge on what the flavor's going to be and see if I want to adjust anything. And once that's all mixed, I'll do just that. And this one probably needed a bit more sugar, so I went and took the last remaining couple tablespoons of sugar from our brown sugar container and poured that in there. And then I'll follow that up with 2 eggs before I get to mixing it all again. Now that the eggs are incorporated with the other ingredients, I'll go ahead and start adding the flour to the mix, and in this case I'll add 1.5 cups, and that's all-purpose flour for those of you following along at home. And then I end up dumping a bunch of baking soda in. It's really supposed to be like half a tablespoon, but whatever, this baking soda is kind of old anyways. I'll carefully start mixing the flour in so it doesn't explode everywhere. And once that's mixed, I could be done here, but I'm going to add a little something special here. And that's this nice bar of chocolate from Austria that my wife and I picked up on our anniversary trip last year. Although pretty much any chocolate bar would do here, we're baking it into a banana bread. Just make sure you cut it on a cutting board with a chef's knife, because that looks way cooler, and by the transitive property will make the chocolate taste better. Once that's chopped up into a bunch of chocolatey shards, we will move that into the mixing bowl and then give it one last mix to get it nice and incorporated, and then that is the batter for this banana bread. I'll take some parchment paper and crumple it up so it fits easily into a baking pan, and then I will scrape the sides of the bowl and kind of mix in any loose flour that might still be in there and pour it into the bread pan. I'll give it a little shake to even it out a bit before it heads off into the oven, which by now should be at the 350 degrees Fahrenheit we set before we started this whole process. Hey, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you. Approximately 1 hour and 5 minutes later, it's time to remove the bread from the oven. I checked it at about 1 hour and it was still a little bit raw, probably because we have 3 bananas in there, so there's some extra moisture. But you can check by using a toothpick, and if there are just a few little crumbs on it, that probably means it's good to go. If anything, I slightly overcooked this one, but not by much. Now the hard part begins, and that's letting this thing cool down for about an hour before we finally slice into it and get ready to try it out. You can note the little specks of chocolate on the cross section, which is a wonderful sight. We really didn't put that much chocolate into this thing. You could really go overboard if you wanted to. But we slap a slice with a bit of homemade vanilla whipped cream, and now it is officially ready for consumption. My wife very much enjoyed it, so that's the recipe. Happy wife, happy life.